Have you ever sat through disputes on construction projects where people were arguing about who was responsible for what? Have you ever heard people use the term alliance contract or design and construct contract and not really understood what they were talking about? Or maybe you just find the whole topic of construction contracts overwhelming and confusing. Well, if you've answered yes to any of these questions, then this course is designed just for you. My name's Tim, and I'm an engineer with lots of experience on the design and construction of major infrastructure projects. I've been building short courses to teach the fundamental construction management skills to engineers and other construction management professionals. The courses are designed to teach the skills that you'll use on your job every day. And so far, we've had over 1,000 students enroll in our course. Each course is loaded with hours of content and practice activities to make sure you're equipped with the skills you need to excel at your job. This short video is an extract of our course on construction contract management, where we'll teach you everything you need to know about the different forms of construction contracts. We go through each of the most common forms of head contract. This is the contract between a client and a head contractor. We talk about how these different forms vary and the pros and cons of each. If you find this video interesting and useful, check out the link in the below description to our complete Udemy course on construction contract management. Hi, and welcome to the first section of topic 3, section 3.1, where we're going to talk about all the different forms of head contract. Head contracts vary from project to project, and this section provides a high-level overview of the different forms of contract that a client or project developer will use to engage a contractor. We're going to cover the criteria that head contracts vary around, followed by going through the most common form of head contract, including managing contractor, alliance, early contractor involvement, construct-only, design and construct, and public-private partnership. In each section, we'll go through the contract model and the pros and cons of that specific model. So what are the criteria around which different forms of head contract vary? Well, some of the key ones that will change with each form of head contract are the project stage during which the client will engage the contractor. So whether the client engages the contractor to get their involvement of them to manage the design, or when the design is fully complete. The specific responsibilities of the contractor, the level of risk transfer, and the type of risk transfer. So how much risk is the contractor exposed to? The commercial payment mechanism, so how the contractor gets paid, lump sum, schedule of rates, cost plus. The level of ownership and management retained by the client, and the project deadlines and specific project time frame. Keep in mind, when we are going through the head contract forms, that the form of head contract will need to be adapted to suit the project, not the other way around. The first contract form we'll look at is the managing contractor model. This is where the contractor is engaged by the principal to manage the scope of works on behalf of the client. So if you look at the diagram on the right-hand side, the client will be engaging the subcontractors directly. However, this process will be managed by the contractor. The payment mechanism is typically cost plus, with limited risk passed on to the head contractor. However, the contract may have abatements and KPIs, depending on the performance of the contractor. Additionally, there may be a warranted maximum price contract under which the contractor guarantees a maximum price for completing the works. Over and above this maximum price, the contractor will have to wear the costs. Under a managing contractor model, the contractor will generally be engaged to provide input into the early project planning and design stages. Some of the benefits of a managing contractor model from the perspective of the client is that the contractor is involved early, providing constructability input and perspective into the design and planning. This may be expertise that the client critically needs but does not have. Furthermore, it's quick and easy to start works under this model. There is no need to map out a detailed scope of works and ensure all the risk is transferred to the contractor. Finally, The client retains a lot of control over the works and can make decisions to influence them during the project delivery. Some of the disadvantages of this model is that the risk for time, cost, and quality ultimately sits with the principal. They have not transferred this risk to the contractor. Additionally, a lot of client experience is required if they want to benefit from retaining control. Additionally, there is still a lot of price uncertainty, which can affect the client's financing of the project. The next model we'll look at is the alliance model. An alliance model is referred to as a relationship-based contract. The client, the contractor, and the designer work collaboratively on an open book basis to complete the project. They form an integrated project team from which they engage the subcontractors and suppliers necessary to complete the project. An alliance leadership team will be formed from all the members of the alliance that oversee the delivery of the project. Under an alliance contract, limited risk is passed on to the contractor. There is typically a pain or gain share payment mechanism between the client and the contractor, where the client and the contractor share in both profit and losses. The alliance team is generally formed at the project concept stage, and the team will work collaboratively to establish the project scope and cost. Alliance projects are used typically when the project scope is not clear and extensive risks are involved. Forming the project team early and working together to form the project budget and schedule allows these risks to be transferred, understood, shared, and managed effectively. Typically, alliance projects are used in rail environments, which are heavy brownfield environments with significant risks that can't be understood at tender stage. A brownfield project is where the existing infrastructure is being upgraded, and therefore the works involve impacting existing infrastructure that might not be known or fully understood. This is opposite to a greenfield project, which involves creating new infrastructure. Alliance contract works well to establish a best for project focus for the contractor. Additionally, the contractor is involved at an early stage to maximize their input into the design and planning. Furthermore, the client retains extensive control and has capability to implement and manage change. Again, similar to a managing contractor model, the client still retains a lot of the project risks, as they are not transferred to a contractor. A more experienced client is also required to effectively control and make best for project decisions. And finally, there is price uncertainty, as a lump sum price has not been passed on to the contractor. This may make the project feasibility analysis harder for the client, as total costs are more uncertain. Under an early contractor involvement, or ECI model, the contractor is engaged early to review the design and project scope. This is done to identify inefficiencies and provide constructability input into the design and project planning. The contractor is generally engaged prior to the concept design stage, as opposed to a typical design and construct contract, where the contractor is engaged to complete the detailed design and construction. Once the contractor has provided input into the design and development and project planning, the contractor will then submit a fixed cost for the complete design and construction, or construct-only scope. Under this second stage of bidding, the works are not procured competitively, but the contractor will take on the risk of completing the works to a fixed lump sum price. The pros of an ECI model are that there is a quick start to the project. The contractor is engaged early, with limited risk to support the design and detailed planning. The input is a major advantage, as well as the constructability reviews to the original planning and design will often prove invaluable once construction begins. Another advantage of an ECI model is that after the initial planning and detailed design stage, once the contractor submits a fixed price for the works, the ultimate project risk for cost, quality, and program is transferred to the contractor. Some of the disadvantages of an ECI model from the perspective of the client is that the contractor is procured under a non-competitive tender, meaning they may increase their prices as they know they're not having to beat competition from other contractors. This is different from a D&C model, where there is competition between potential contractors. Furthermore, The ECI model requires a two-stage process, which can add time to the overall project schedule. The contractor will need to prepare and submit a fixed price quote after the design stage. Furthermore, client experience is required to ensure that the D&C scope can effectively be managed. Under a construct-only scope, the client completes the detailed design and issues the contractor an issue for construction drawing set to build. The client is responsible for completing the design, and any changes to the design would constitute a variation to the project scope. The contractor is only responsible for the construction. To complete this, the client will need a good understanding of the project scope and be able to resolve any constructability issues with the design. We can see this structure in the design on the right, where the client procures both the consultant and the contractor. Some of the advantages of a construct-only package from the perspective of the client is that the procurement of the contractor is run through a competitive tender, meaning there is price competition between contractors. Contractors will bid for the works with lower profit margins and less contingency to ensure they win the project. Furthermore, the client will have price certainty, meaning they know how much the project will cost based on the contractor's lump sum price, assuming the project is well scoped and there are not too many variations. Finally, risk is transferred to the contractor to manage. They are responsible for managing costs, quality, and the project schedule. Some of the disadvantages of a construct-only contract model is that the design risk sits with the client. They are responsible for producing the design, and any inaccuracies, errors, or omissions in the design will result in expensive rework and variations from the contractor. Client experience is required to make sure the design is completed correctly and any constructability issues are identified and resolved. Furthermore, once the contract is awarded, the client effectively loses control over the project. If the client wishes to change the scope, they will need to pay expensive variations to change things. A design and construct, or D&C project, is the same as a construct-only contract, except that the contractor is also responsible for the development of the detailed design. Therefore, the design risk has been passed on to the contractor. The client will need to procure a concept design showing roughly what they want and project scope. The contractor will then base their quote to take this concept design, produce an issue for construction design, and then build it. You can see this set up on the diagram to the right, where the contractor is engaging both the consultant to complete the design and the subcontractors to complete the works. Again, similar to a construct-only contract, a D&C contract will have a lump sum payment mechanism. So, similar to a construct-only contract, the pros and cons from the perspective of the client, a D&C contract will result in price competition between potential contractors, resulting in a lower price for the client. Contractors will cut risk contingency and profit margins to secure the project. Furthermore, under a D&C, the contractor is responsible for managing the design risk, and this is often a significant project risk. Again, under a D&C, most risks are transferred to the contractor, who is responsible ultimately for cost, quality, and program. Some of the disadvantages of a D&C model from the perspective of the client is that it can result in adversarial relationships between the contractor and the client. The contractor may be exposed to extensive risk under low profit margins. There will likely be numerous disputes about cost and scope, particularly about the design development and interpretation of the project requirements from the concept design. I've worked on a D&C project where requirements were murky and unclear, resulting in constant battles with the client. Furthermore, the project will need to be clearly scoped out and requirements for the contractor understood. Again, the client will lose a lot of power to change things, and once the works begin and the contract is awarded, any changes will need to be made through expensive change orders. A public-private partnership is the procurement model with the greatest risk and responsibility transferred to the contractor. The contractor will generally form what's called a special purpose vehicle or consortium that, for a given project, complete the finance, design, construction, operations, and maintenance of the project. So the contractor will form a consortium with investment banks and operations and a maintenance provider to complete the entire project scope from start to finish, including the maintenance period. In this way, the client, typically government bodies, as PPPs are generally only used for massive multi-billion-dollar projects, simply has to pay the consortium a fixed annuity over the project life, typically 25 years, and all the risk and responsibility is on the consortium. This means the consortium will need to organise the financing of the project, take the concept design and construct it in the most effective way, while also minimising the whole-of-life operations and maintenance cost. Some examples of PPP projects include the Tunnel and Stations package on the new Melbourne Metro Tunnel and Transurban building the North Connects Tunnel in Sydney. Some of the advantages of a PPP model are that they are procured competitively, so potential contractors will have to competitively bid for this massive scale project. They will try to cut costs, and so the government should theoretically get the most cost competitive outcome. Furthermore, the design risk again sits with the contractor, but in this instance, the contract needs to design something that also has a low whole-of-life value. In this way, the contractor needs to factor in construction costs, maintenance costs, and finance costs, and so ideally, we'll bring all these components of the project together to develop the best solution for the project. And finally, all risk is transferred to the contractor, not just the D&C scope, but also the financing and maintenance risk. So what are the cons? Well, similar to D&C projects, PPPs lead to adversarial relationships between the contractor and the client. Most PPPs end up in some sort of dispute. A significant part of it is differing interpretations of scope and expectations. In addition, such a huge amount of risk is passed on to the contractor that there is a significant chance that the contractor does not have enough contingency factored in and may lose money completing such a project. This will likely be incredibly difficult and lead to extensive disputes and delays. Finally, the client will lose all control over the project. Variations under PPPs can be much more expensive than under D&C projects, as now the client, when instigating changes, will also need to factor in financing and operation and maintenance cost implications. That brings us to the end of our short introduction on forms of head contract. You could write a whole course just on this topic. However, this was just meant to give you a brief overview so you recognize the different types of contract models. Hopefully now you have a good understanding of the most common contract models. Next, we're going to go into how the head contract is formed and the process for a client selecting a head contractor.